Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Howard Wagner, and I am the host of Work Past the Record. And what this is a podcast to help with real strategies for people looking for a second chance because they have a criminal background, or they were just released from jail, or they have a past criminal history that is hindering them from being able to get gainful employment. I currently work in a reentry program where I teach people employability skills and help them secure employment, gaps in employment, because sometimes people have been in jail for a period of 6 months or a year and they have this gap in their employment, and an employer wants to know why. So, all I'm going to do is over the podcast that we do is use some real life stories of some successes that I've had, but also stories of some failures that we've had because not everything is a success, as you know, and I'm not going to pretend that it is. We do have failures sometimes, but I'm also going to focus on strategies to help you if you are the person that's having a hard time getting a job because you have a past that's not so pretty. So, I'm also going to put this out there for employers and why it's important to give people a second chance at employment. So, it's going to be kind of well rounded for everything. But I'm going to start out with first of all, you may not know this, but over 2.2 million people are in jail or prison in the United States. Now, that can be state, county, federal. That's a lot of people when you think about it, right? There's a lot of people in jail or prison. And out of those 2.2 million people, 600,000, roughly about 600,000 people get released from federal or state prison every year. So that when you look at the population of the United States and you think that between 70 and 100 million people have a criminal record, that's 1 in 3 adults. So if you're sitting in a room right now with four people, not your family, but four people, let's say, just strangers, know that 1 in 3 of you has a criminal record, and it may be you. So a criminal record doesn't always mean you went to jail or you went to prison. It means that you got arrested for something. So we all know that sometimes people get arrested for charges that show up on their background, but they didn't do any jail time for it. Maybe they had to pay fines, maybe they had to pay restitution. Not everybody goes to jail for every single arrest. In some states, I'm not going to name them, but in some states, being homeless is a crime. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? You get charged with trespassing, you get charged with loitering, you get charged with being on some, well, I guess it's like trespassing, but they name it differently here where I'm at, and they say entering someone's field or property without authority. It's trespassing, but that they charge them with trespassing and they charge them with this illegal entering onto someone's field or property. That can prevent someone from being able to get employment because all an employer sees is loitering or trespassing. They don't know the story behind it. So little charges like that can prevent someone from being able to get employment. So if you're one of those people, then this is the place you need to be because I'm going to tell you how to incorporate all that into your resumes, into your interviews, so that you can impress an employer and be able to get gainful employment. Everybody needs to make money. Unemployment is nearly 30% for the people that have a criminal background. So 30% of people with a background are unemployed. 64% of men in their 30s have an arrest or conviction on their record and they are unemployed. So you have these young guys in their 30s that cannot work because they have an arrest somewhere on their record or they've been convicted of something. So what does it happens when we have a lack of employment? You start thinking, why am I trying to do things the right way? Nobody's giving me a chance, so I'm going to go back to my old ways. Now, that could be maybe you were dealing drugs at one time and making money doing it. Maybe you were stealing. Maybe you were pulling scams on people just to get money, an easy way, but it ended up getting you a record and now you can't get work at all. So recidivism happens because people cannot get employment and everybody needs to live. Still need to eat. You still need to pay rent. You don't want to be living on the streets. Maybe you have kids you have to take care of. So recidivism happens because people with backgrounds cannot get employment. And it's not fair and it's like a vicious circle. So I'm hoping that this podcast will help people be able to overcome those barriers that they have to employment. Because I don't want anybody to be a lack of employment. I don't want to see anybody go back to jail. But if I can help one person, then I have done something good with my life. That's the way I feel about it. When we look at employers, 9 out of 10 employers use background checks. So it doesn't seem fair. And I feel like, sometimes we run backgrounds, but we should only go back a certain amount of years. It doesn't always work that way. I don't know. I had two different numbers. One said 37 states and the other one said 40 states. And they have the Fair Chance Act in place, which translates into ban the box. So, on the application when you're filling it out, there's a little box that you check. Have you ever been convicted of a crime or have you ever been arrested for a crime, excluding traffic violations? That little box is banned in 37 to 40 states. Employer can't ask you that when you're filling out an application because it can lead to employment discrimination. They see you check that box, they put the narrative to your story without ever talking to you, and they just bypass you for the interview process or the hiring process. So the ban the box is there, so that box cannot be used. Now, can that employer still run a background check on you? They sure can, but not until they have offered you the job. So you have to be afforded the time for an interview. You have to be offered the job, you have to accept the offer, and when you do that, that's when they run the background check, which is why I'm gonna explain why it's important to put your background right there in the interview. There are ways to present your background in a positive light, and I know you're probably like, "Yeah, right. I have a robbery in my background from 10 years ago." Some backgrounds only go back 7 years, and that's for minor crimes, and then there's the 10-year background check for people that have, mid-level crimes, and then there's the 20-year background check for people that have really violent crimes. It can stay on their record up to 20 years. What is important is for you, when you do meet with an employer, let's say you're in one of those states where they are the fair chance state, and the employer says to you, "We're going to run a background check on you if we offer you the job. What will we find on it?" Now, technically, they're not really supposed to ask you that until after they offer you the job and you accept it. But counties, towns, cities, they can all do things their own way. They can interpret the law their own way. They can say, "Oh, we don't have it on the application. We ask in the interview." When do you tell somebody about your background? I always say that you should tell them right in the beginning when they're asking about you. Tell me about yourself. Hey, you know what? 10 years ago, when I was younger, was involved in some stuff. I got arrested. I did some jail time. I was on probation, but I have turned my life around. Well, now is the time when you want to tell them how you've turned your life around. So I want you to think about this. If you were ever in jail or prison and you were trying to get out on parole, let's say, you have to present a good case to the parole board about why you want to get out. What have you learned while being in jail or prison? Well, you take the classes that they offer. Maybe you did AA, maybe you did NA, maybe you joined a spiritual group in there, maybe you took high school classes, maybe you took certification classes for computers or welding or construction. Those are the things you want to keep track of. Now, maybe in your mind, oh, that just passed time while I was doing time. No, those are important things because those are life skills that you have learned and they're something that you can take into another job. You want to put that all into a 3-ring binder, let's say. Every class you've taken, every rehabilitation class, group, everything you've done, and this is why it's important. You can show to an employer why you're worth taking the chance. When you do that, they see that you have made an effort to change from that person you were when you got arrested to who you are when you're sitting in front of them doing an interview. I know it sounds like, oh, that's a lot of work. No, it's an important part of work. You want to be able to tell somebody what the good in you is to give you a fair chance at a job just like anybody else coming in off the street without a record. I find myself that the people that I train and I put to work harder than the people that are hired off the street because they feel they have more to prove. That's not the case with everybody. Some people are just, they don't care what you think of them. They're going to be lazy if they're going to be lazy. They're going to work hard if they want to work hard. But the general thing that I see is that my people work harder than someone that just gets hired off the street because they have more to prove to themselves and to society that this is why you need to take a chance on me. Plus, if you want to be able to promote up or get a better job, you want to make the best impression you can at whatever job you can get that's willing to hire you with a background so that you can take that with you to the next big job. Or maybe at that job, you can get offered a promotion. You have to interview for that promotion. You want to be able to say, hey, while I've been here, this is what I've done. This is my experience. These are the things that are important in order for you to be a successful employee, to be a meaningful part of society again. And it's not easy. I have worked with people that have done over 20 years in prison. They get out, they don't even know how to use a cell phone because when they went in, it was a flip phone, and one man went in, they didn't even have cell phones. When he went in, everybody was still using pagers. That's how long he was in prison for. He had to relearn everything all over again. He was took some basic computer classes while he was in prison. That didn't help him with the cell phone. When he came out, jobs that he did before are done differently now, or they don't even exist because everything's been taken over by autonomy. Being able to present those skills that you have in an interview are important because you want to show your rehabilitation. So, yeah, you might have a record, but that doesn't mean you're that same person that you were when you were arrested or when you were convicted or when you had those charges. Now, you do get some people that come through, and the only reason they are working is because a court has told them they have to. So, you don't get quality people out of that. But I figure if you're listening to my podcast and you really need some tips, or you really are interested in getting some tips to be able to better your life, and that's what I want to help you do. So, being upfront, being honest, don't let somebody else take your narrative. I'm going to tell you why. If you say to an employer, hey, I have a criminal past, and then you don't go into any more detail about it, maybe you say, it was some burglary stuff, or it was some robberies, or it was some assaults, and you don't go into what happened without going into what happened completely and how you've rehabilitated from that, that employer takes that and they form their own narrative. Well, who did they beat up? Did they beat up their spouse? Did they beat up a family member? Were they beating up their kid? Did they beat just some old lady on the street while they were robbing her purse? That's what I mean about being able to take control of your own narrative. A lot of people get out of jail. They're not used to having control over their life, never mind their choices, because it's all dictated for them while they're incarcerated. But this is the one place where you have the ability to take control of your narrative. You have the ability to tell an employer, this is where I was, this is what happened, and this is where I am now. Also, take accountability for what you did. Sometimes I interview people, and to get into my program, you have to have a background or you cannot come into the program because we're a second chance program. And it's so easy for somebody with a background to not disclose what their background is because that is what you have been programmed to do. Don't tell anybody about your background because you're trying to get a job. Don't tell anybody about your background because you're trying to get an apartment. When background checks get run and then they come back and the person that has interviewed you or is getting ready to rent to you sees that background already, now you have just put a doubt in their mind like, why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they tell me that they had this on their background? You don't know what an employer or what a landlord can work with. So by not disclosing it makes it worse than just telling them straight out, this is what happened. But take accountability. So many times I interview someone and they have a domestic violence or they have a shoplifting on their record. The first thing they want to tell me is, but I never should have been convicted of that because it wasn't me. I was in a domestic violence situation and he made me shoplift. In some cases, that may be true. Or I didn't want to hit that person, but they came at me first, and because I left a mark, I'm the one that went to jail. That can be true too. But own up to what you've done. Don't push the blame off on anybody else. Accountability is key. If an employer sees that you are accountable for your actions, they're more likely to trust you as an employee. There are plenty of employers out there that are second chance employers. In one of my future episodes, I'll give you an example of a few of them. I'm not going to do that. This is just kind of an introductory podcast. I just want you to know that I'm here to help you. I'm going to give you some strategies. I'm going to share some real life stories with you. I may even have one or two of my people that I've worked with, ask them if they want to come on to maybe tell their story too. They all love to tell their stories. But my main thing is I want you to be successful. I want you to be not a potential employee. I want you to be the employee. I want you to grow, and I want you to have some tips in case you don't know what to do. Like, how do I put that into my resume? I have a 10-year gap. How do we do that? Well, there's ways to do that that we're going to discuss. Believe it or not, if you work in the jail, and I had one man that did a lot of time in prison, but he worked while he was there, and we incorporated that into his resume. Granted, he was in prison for over 20 years. I don't want to say that I worked at the prison. Why not? You worked for a company that's contracted by the prison. You're not saying that while I was in prison, this is what I did. You're saying I worked for this company because that's what he did. He worked for that company. Doesn't matter that he was in prison or not. No. If they ask, what do they do? Hey, I think they were a supply company for prisons. Okay. That might end the conversation right there. You're a supply company for prisons. That's where you worked. When you get to the part where you tell them about your background, you tell them about your background. It's up to you how you want to disclose it. But the important thing is disclosing it. So, although there are a lot of barriers to employment when you have a record, I'm going to show you that every barrier has, can be torn down, I guess. Employers, if you're listening, it's important as well to know the time elapsed redemption rule. How long has it been since this person committed the crime? How long has it been since they got arrested again? Or did they never get arrested again? If somebody did 13 years in prison and they got out in 2015, it's 2026. It's 11 years later. If they have not gotten in any trouble since then, why aren't you going to give them a chance? And granted, the nature of the crime is also important. Was it a low nature offense, like a misdemeanor? Um, or was it a moderate felony theft or aggravated assault or embezzlement? Or was it high violent crimes like murder or robbery or kidnapping, arson, that kind of stuff? Where are you going to draw the line on how you decide where or who you hire? You have to look at the nature of the crime. Obviously, if you have somebody that had embezzlement and they did time in prison, you probably don't want to make them your bookkeeper, right? And you probably don't want to put them in your cash office at a store. But there may be other jobs you can give them where finances are not even within their reach. If someone, has violent tendencies, maybe you put them on the overnight shift where there's less people working if you think they have not rehabilitated. There are so many things that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at you got to look at the person, and you have to look at the time since their last crime. You have to look at what the nature of that crime was. You have to look at what their rehabilitation was. But you as an employee also have to be able to express that and show proof of that rehabilitation. You're the one who has something to gain here. An employer, especially now, there are so many people that are applying for the same jobs. You want to be the one that stands out. You want them to know that you're worth taking a chance on. Okay, so if some people have like a permanent record, right? And that's what I was talking about before. It can be over 20 years for really extensive violent or chronic criminal histories. So if somebody has been committing burglaries or robberies for 20 years and they're 40 years old, well, that might be on a permanent record because they just continually keep doing it over and over and over again, even if there's time in between. But if you have somebody, excuse me, that has been redeemed or rehabilitated and is most likely not going to commit that crime again, maybe you only want to go back 10 years. 7 years, usually some felonies may appear on somebody's record for 7 years, but what was it? I mean, driving under the influence can be a felony level if it's been repeated charges. So this is what I mean when I say you have to look at what it is. But if you're not hiring this person to drive and they're no longer drinking because they're highly involved in AA and they've been to rehab and they've been sober for 2 years, let's say, well, maybe you want to hire them to work on your loading dock. Maybe you want to hire them to work in your stockroom. Maybe you want to hire them to do maintenance, something that doesn't require them to drive. Why would a felony DUI affect them as an employee for you if the driving isn't involved? That's what I mean about looking at the nature of the crime and the time in between. Now, everybody else that has the background, you have to look at that too. If you have, let's use the felony DUI again, the felony DUI on your record and you're applying for a job in a warehouse and they say, we're going to run a background on you if you accept the position. And then they do, and they see that you have felony DUI and they say, hey, what happened? Whatever. And you can very easily say, hey, I have been sober for 2 years. I attend meetings regularly. I sponsor someone. I have no desire to go back to drinking. I'm not applying for a driving job. I just want to work in your warehouse. I want to load pallets. I want to load trucks. I want to sort through items. I want to pick orders. You have a good chance of getting that job because you've been upfront and forward, but be able to show that you have been rehabilitated because that is the most important part of this. And we're going to talk about how to put that in with your resume. It's almost like presenting a whole book. Now, when we do resumes, I'm going to tell you that you only go back about 7 to 10 years and it should be all on one page. Now, if you've had multiple jobs, it's going to be on more than one page. But I'm going to tell you how to incorporate your criminal history if you think it may affect your chances at getting a position into your cover letter, basically. So that's what this is all about. And, I'm really passionate about what I do because I think people should be given second chances. I think people should be able to work past their record. I don't think people should be defined by it. I think some of the strategies I'm going to give people are maybe some that they've never heard of before. And not every person with a criminal background is a bad person, basically. Some, yes, but mostly no. Most people come out and they really want to make a difference in their life. The people I work with, they want to make a difference. They strive to be better than they were yesterday. And I think that's an important factor for any employer to consider. But I think you, as a potential employee, you need to be able to show that. You need to be able to show that you've made the change. So I hope that this podcast will reach people. I hope that it will help people gain a little bit of confidence and see a light at the end of the tunnel that, hey, you know what? There is a job out there for me. And I'm going to use some of these strategies that Lori's teaching me so that I can get there because I feel like it's important. And as I said, we will go over some of the companies that do hire people with a felony background or a criminal background in general. Because as I said, not every criminal background resulted in prison or in jail. Sometimes it's just an arrest. Maybe you got held for a few hours, you got bonded out or bailed out, depending on which part of the country you're in. You're just waiting to go to court. You're hoping that everything's going to be done with. But if it isn't and you have to plead out to something, maybe you just got a fine that you had to pay. Maybe you just had to pay restitution. Maybe you had to do community service. There are so many other things other than they went to jail or they went to prison. It's the same thing. The treatment courts across the country are not just drug treatment. There's mental health, there's veterans treatment court. There are lots of courts. I worked in an adult treatment court when I was in Maine, and I also was the mental health case manager for mental health court. So some of those people never went to jail. They didn't go to prison. They just got in trouble for dealing drugs or being whatever. They got held and then they were released on these diversion programs in hopes that they would be successful and get rehabilitated and do better. So I work with a lot of people in treatment court now in the job I do, and I see the struggles they have, and I see the struggles they have with trying to balance everything. But we're going to talk about all of that stuff in this podcast, and I hope that this is going to be a good experience for anybody listening. I'm hoping that you, as I said, that you get something out of this. And I'm always open to suggestions. If there's something that you would like for me to discuss during my podcast, there will be a comment section. Please, please give me a comment. I will do the research. We'll talk about it. If it's something that I've dealt with before, I may be able to give you some firsthand advice or suggestions. I'm giving you suggestions that maybe you can incorporate into your own life and how you can make it work. But I'm always open to topics. So please feel free to contact me through the comment section on these podcasts. I'm probably going to try to do one at least once a week, if not once every couple of weeks. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week yet. I think next week We may start with attitudes and the importance of having a good attitude and when to leave your attitude at the door. And that's one of the first things I teach my groups when they come through my program. So I'm going to try to follow the curriculum that I do there, and, we'll talk about that. We're going to be talking about the importance of professional communication. We're going to be talking about the importance of cutting ties, of setting boundaries, of being a good listener. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Anger management. Yeah, a lot of stuff we're going to talk about. But you know what? It's going to be all for anybody that's listening to this, and I hope that it helps them. And everybody have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you soon.